Hey, boys and girls. I wanted to introduce you to an author illustrator you probably already know. Raise your hand if you know The Polar Express. Oh, there's a lot of hands up there. You know that. You know the movie. What about Jumanji? Yeah, well, those two stories were all the kernel of that story in that movie came from an author called Chris von Allsbrook. His books are in the VANs, if you were to look for them. And he is an author illustrator. These books are so shiny. His pictures are absolutely beautiful. He also did a book called Just a Dream. He did this one, The Mysteries of Harris Burdock. Very dark, a lot of black and white. The Wreck of the Zephyr, about a boat. This one, The Wretched Stone. They look kind of dark, and they are kind of dark. And I have one that's perfect for this time of year. And I'm going to hold up the pictures for you to see. They're just, I think he did them like pen and ink or pencil and charcoal. No color, just beautiful, beautiful pictures. And this one you would probably never pick up in a million years. Thank you, Mrs. Hollinger, for reminding me of this wonderful author illustrator. The Widow's Broom. What? We're going to read a book about a broom? Are you kidding me? Mrs. Baldwin, you've gone off the deep end. You think I'm going to read a book about a broom? You're going to like it. A Broom. The Widow's Broom by Chris von Allsbrook. From 1992. Witches' brooms don't last forever. They grow old, and even the best of them one day lose the power of flight. Fortunately, this does not happen all at once or in an instant. A witch can feel the strength slowly leaving her broom. The sudden bursts of energy that once carried her quickly into the sky become weak. Longer and longer running starts are needed for takeoff. Speedy brooms that, in their youth, outraced hawks are now passed by slow flying geese. When these things happen, a witch knows it's time to put her old broom aside and have a new one made. On very rare occasions, however, a broom can lose its power without warning and fall with its passenger to the earth below, which is just what happened on a cold autumn night many years ago. Out of a moonlit sky, a dark, cloaked figure came spinning to the ground. The witch, along with her tired broom, landed beside a small white farmhouse, the home of a lonely widow named Mina Shaw. At daybreak, Widow Shaw discovered the witch lying in her vegetable garden. She was bruised and bloody and couldn't stand up on her own. In spite of her fear, and because she was a kind woman, Mina Shaw helped that witch inside and put her to bed. The witch asked Minnie Shaw to draw the curtains. She wrapped herself tightly in her black cape and fell soundly asleep. She lay there perfectly still all day and all evening. When she finally awoke at midnight, her wounds were completely healed. Witches have special powers. She rose from the bed and moved silently through the widow's house. Mina Shaw was asleep in a chair by the fireplace where embers of a dying fire glowed on the hearth. The witch knelt and took one of the red, hot coals in her hand. Outside, She made a fire of leaves and twigs and then dropped a strand of her hair into the fire. The fire hissed and crackled, burning with a brilliant blue light. Before long, the witch could see a dark form flying overhead. It was another witch who circled slowly and landed beside the fire. The two women spoke briefly, the first witch gesturing toward the garden where her old broom rested. Then they sat side by side on the second witch's broom and flew off over the treetops. When Mina Shaw woke up, she wasn't surprised to find that her guest had gone. Witches, she knew, had unusual powers. It didn't surprise her either when she saw the old broom had been left behind. The widow guessed it had lost its magic. It was an ordinary broom now, just like the one she kept in her kitchen. She began using it around the house and found that it was no better or worse than any broom she'd used before. One morning, Mina Shaw was still in bed when she heard a noise coming from the kitchen. She peeked in and saw something that made her heart jump. There was the broom, sweeping the floor by itself. It stopped for a moment, turned to the widow, and then went back to work. At first, Mina was frightened, but the broom seemed harmless, and what's more, it was doing a very good job. Unfortunately, it swept all day long. In the evening, to get some peace, she locked the broom in a closet. But when it tapped on the door for over an hour, she felt guilty and let it out. As she lay in bed listening to the broom sweeping each room over and over, she wondered if it could learn to do other things. In the morning, she led the broom outside and found it was a very good student. She needed to show it how to do something only once. Soon the broom could chop wood and fetch water, feed the chickens, and bring the cow in from the pasture. It could even pick out simple tunes on the piano. Not a week passed before the widow's neighbors, the Speevies, found out about the broom. Their farm was just down the road, the only other place around. And it was one of the 8 Speevie children who saw the broom first. When the boy told his father, Mr. Speevie ran straight across to the widow's house. "Is it true?" he demanded. "Did she really have such a broom?" "Oh, yes," Mina said. "It's wonderful." She told her neighbor all about the broom, the witch who left it behind, and she took him around to the back of the house where the broom was hard at work splitting wood. Mr. Speevie was horrified. "This is a wicked, wicked thing," he said. This is the devil." The broom stopped working, and, still clutching the axe, hopped toward the widow and the neighbor. Mr. Speevie, red-faced with anger, turned quickly and hurried home. Soon more distant neighbors heard about the broom and visited the widow's farm. The men who saw it seemed to agree. Probably was a wicked thing. But their wives pointed out that it was a great help to the widow and could play the piano well, considering that it struck only one note at a time. No one's feelings were as strong as Mr. Speevie's. "It's evil and it's dangerous," he told everyone who would listen. "We'll all be sorry if that thing stays among us." As the days went by, the broom seemed as innocent and hardworking as ever. Although it had learned how to do many things, sweeping brought it special pleasure. After all, it was a broom. Occasionally, when there was nothing left to do around the widow's house, it would hop down to the road that separated Mina Shaw's and the Speevies' farms. Sorry about that. It would hop down the road that separated Mina Shaw's and the Speevies' farms. The road was dirt, of course, and the broom would amuse itself there for hours, sweeping away. One afternoon, two of the Speevie boys and their dog walked along down the road where the broom was happily at work. When they saw what it was doing, they kicked the small stones the broom had swept aside back into its path. The broom ignored them and shuffled off to sweep another part of the road, but the Speevie boys would not leave it alone. They called the broom names. When it continued to ignore them, they picked up a couple of sticks and started tapping the broom's handle. Finally, it stopped sweeping. The broom turned to the two boys and knocked them both in the head so hard they fell to the ground in tears. The broom hopped off, but the Speevie dog ran after it, yapping and biting at its bristles. "Get him!" the boys yelled. The little dog leaped into the air and caught the broom by the handle. But he was not there for long. That evening, Mr. Speevie drove his wagon up to the widow's house. He was not alone. 3 men from neighboring farms were in the wagon, along with a long wooden stake and coils of rope. Mr. Speevie knocked loudly. When she opened her door, Mina was frightened by what she saw. "We've come for the broom," the neighbor told her. "It's beaten my sons and likely done worse to my dog." The poor animal was nowhere to be found. The widow could tell by their faces that the men would not be leaving without her broom. For a moment she stood silent and then answered, "Of course, you are right. If it could do such a thing, we must get rid of it." She led the men into her kitchen. "It sleeps in here," she whispered, pointing to a closet. "If you move it carefully, it will not wake up." The men knew how strong the broom was and hoped the widow was right. They opened the closet door, revealing the slumbering broom. One of the farmers took it out and gently held it against the stake, while the others wrapped it in yards of rope. They carried the broom outside, drove the stake into the ground, and gathered straw around it. Mr. Speevie lit the fire. In no time, flames burned the broom to ashes. Soon, life returned to normal around the widow's farm. The Speevies even found their dog, healthy but hungry, caught in the branches of a tall spruce tree. And then one morning, Mina Shaw called on the neighbors with frightening news. She had seen the ghost of the broom. It was white as snow and moved through the woods at night, carrying an axe. Mr. Speevie did not believe her. But that night, under a full moon, he watched from a window as the broom's white ghost came out of the woods and slowly circled his house. The next night it returned, circling even closer. And the night after that it came again, tapping the axe. Against the Speevie's door lightly. The next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Speevie packed their dearest possessions and their 8 children into their wagon. Mr. Speevie tried to convince the widow to leave with them, but she chose to stay behind in her little farmhouse. She went down to the road. As the wagon pulled away, she waved goodbye to her neighbors. "You're a brave woman," Mr. Spivey called out. That evening, the widow fell asleep in her chair by the fire. She'd been listening to music, simple tunes played one note a time on the piano. A gentle tap on her shoulder woke her up. She looked up and smiled at the broom. Not a ghost at all, but still covered with a coat of white paint she had given it. "You play so nicely," Minnie Shaw said. The broom bowed, put another log on the fire, and played another tune. Thought a book about a broom would be boring, huh? If I tell you it's a good book, it's guaranteed to be a good book. The Widow's Broom.